This time on the hit list, we pay tribute to 8 very different headline artists who love to tickle the ivories. The insanely multi-talented crooner Jamie Cullum released his first recording while he was still studying English literature at Reading University. After graduating, he released another album of jazz classics with a couple of compositions by him and his brother thrown in. Pointless Nostalgic became a bestseller and set off a record company bidding war. Universal won out, and the 24-year-old singer, songwriter, pianist and drummer found himself with a £1 million contract.
When I started making the record 2nd of January, I felt like a kid in a toy shop with a blank cheque, you know, signed by Bill Gates. It was just, I was so excited to be making a new record that the whole pressure thing didn't seem, because it was so overdue, I was so ready, you know, I was so ready to make new music that I didn't feel pressured at all. I mean, maybe I should have done, but I just sat down and got on with it and enjoyed every. I think there's more pressure now, it's about to come out really, but I've got nothing to do with it coming out, so it's like, I'm fine really.
20-something turned Jamie into Britain's biggest-selling jazz artist of all time and earned him an invitation to play at the 2004 Grammy Awards.
Sitting there at the Grammys, playing and hearing my name come up and the nominations, that was the point where I really thought that it got out of my hands. I was like, what the hell is going on? You know, that was really amazing. And then going to all the parties, that was great. The Grammy week was one of the best.
His ability to mix hip-hop and pop with blues standards and jazz while performing impromptu percussion solos and playing the piano with his feet was earning him fans in very high places.
I was walking down a little backstage area and someone goes, "Hey man, like your music?" And I turned around and it was Quincy Jones. So, names dropping everywhere. Let me just pick all those up. Oh, there we go, got it. There we go, just put them back. So, yeah, there's been amazing things happen. That is kind of better than selling 1 billion records, really, isn't it?
For his next album, Catching Tales, Jamie decided to broaden his horizons even further.
But I wanted to challenge myself more than that in a way, and I was kind of against collaborations a little bit at first, apart from with my brother, and then as I started doing them, I realised it was taking me to places that I didn't necessarily know I could go in, So I started working with people, not necessarily for the album, but just because I could, because I had the time.
In his improvised live shows, Jamie is known for putting his stamp on works by other artists, varying from the White Stripes and Kylie Minogue to Kanye West, Radiohead and Rihanna. In 2003, Tori Amos was voted the world's 5th best touring act by readers of Rolling Stone magazine. That result becomes particularly impressive when you take into account the fact that she has performed many of her shows solo, with nothing more than a piano for accompaniment. Since her first world tour in 1991, she remains one of the world's most active live performers, putting in more than 1,000 concerts over the space of her career. After playing the piano bar circuit in LA and failing to get a music career off the ground in the US, she took off in the UK with her lilting piano-based album Little Earthquakes. Her subsequent releases have earned her more than 12 million album sales and a fiercely loyal fan base, as well as a reputation for being emotionally intense and more than a little eccentric. In 2007, she backed up the release of her 9th album, American Doll Posse, with a live show featuring 5 feminine alter egos.
I must be honest, watching the wardrobes come in for the girls is, I've never experienced anything like it, because I know what it's like to be the redheaded person, but then to be this glamorous Santa who, the things that she wears, I mean, husband was even looking at them coming in and saying, "Do I get a date with the one that wears that frock then?" And I'm thinking, it's quite something to open yourself up to a different way of expressing yourself. So yes, the girls are teaching me all kinds of new tricks.
In many ways, she felt that she'd been coming to this album all her life, and that American Doll Posse reflected the complexities of being a woman. As inspiration, she looked back to ancient Greek history, to a time where women in all their facets were considered divine.
Women are relating to this project because all of us have more, we're complex creatures, and I think we're being unfair when we say, well, we have to be a part of the intellectual set, or we're part of the rebel-rousing set. And then we paint ourselves into these corners instead of stepping out of one painting into another and thinking of ourselves as an exhibition, not just a painting.
In 2008, as well as releasing Tales of a Librarian, a compilation of hits she likes to refer to as a sonic autobiography, she also started work on her 10th studio album, Abnormally Attracted to Sin.
I'm beginning to start composing. I've gathered books from all over the world, and I have them laid out on the floor in the piano room in Cornwall. So I begin as a songwriter. The next stage, I don't know what it is, but I always love this part of it. It's like baking a cake when you're a kid.
A 6-time Grammy Award winner, Billy Joel has sold more than 100 million records worldwide. He's also the first artist to have 5 that have sold more than 7 million copies each. But even after more than 35 years of continuous employment in the music industry, he never takes his good fortune for granted.
It's so hard to make a living just as a musician. It's one of the hardest things in the world. And when you can do that, that's a dream come true, just to be able to be a musician and not have to have another gig and totally devote yourself to the music. That was the most important award, that check. I wish I still had that check, that framed the thing.
Growing up in Hicksville, New York, he took up boxing to counteract the teasing and bullying he suffered as a result of taking music lessons. 16 albums, a marriage to Christy Brinkley, several tours with Elton John, and many battles with depression later, the Piano Man was playing his first ever concert in South Africa.
I've never been here, and you know, a performing, touring career which has gone on some 30-odd years, 35 years now, there's still places I haven't been. This is one of them.
As well as many pop hits, which have included songs like Uptown Girl, It's Still Rock and Roll to Me, and New York State of Mind, Billy Joel has forged a second career as a classical composer. In 2001, he released a classical album called Fantasies and Illusions, which featured acclaimed pianist Richard Dew. He's also known as an avid supporter of the Democrats and performed a duet with Bruce Springsteen in a concert to raise money for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. However, he refuses to use his celebrity to get on his own soapbox.
I get asked a lot, what's your message, and you know, what kind of political agenda you're trying to, you know, define? And I said, look, man, just being a musician it's sort of being a humanitarian already, because we're speaking for people who have no voice, and we're helping to express emotions that a lot of people can't. And you know, I keep my politics to myself. A lot of times I see people get up on the podium and go, well, this is the way you should vote, and this is the way you should think. And I think, oh, shut the hell up. What do you know? You know, you're a musician. I'm a piano player.
I just like to perform, you know. I like to do artistic things, whether it's on Broadway or any other stage, you know. I don't think of it as a validation. I just love to have a good time.
Sometimes that involves acting in films. After appearing in movies like Little Man Tate and Independence Day, he was offered the role of a union rep in a small-town processing plant in Newintown in 2009. He got to learn the romantic comedy ropes from his co-star Renee Zellweger.
She's one of these people that I felt very comfortable around, and I found that after I talked to her, we had a lot of similar sort of takes on life, you know, with regard to, you know, art and just stuff in general we talked about. I found that we had a lot in common, so it was really easy to get to know her, and I think when you have that premise, it's much easier to work with somebody on camera, you know, when you really like being around them.
Occasionally, he also likes to tread the boards. Although after making his Broadway debut in the 2006 revival of The Pajama Game, he wasn't too sure he quite nailed it.
It's a lot of material that I always wanted to know, like when I go see Broadway shows, like, God, how do they remember all those lines and how do they remember all those dance steps? And now I'm still asking myself all of those questions. It makes you appreciate people who do it well.
No doubt, however, the boy from New Orleans feels most comfortable behind a piano or with a microphone in his hand. He made his name at the tender age of 20, playing instrumental versions of jazz standards on his debut album back in 1987. He proved he could croon with the best of them on his next album. And as his career took off, he was frequently compared to the likes of Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett. After flirting with funk in the 90s and writing a few soundtracks, he's more recently returned to his jazz roots. And in between acting, writing, touring and recording, he pops up at jazz festivals to keep a great tradition alive.
It's not that it's been lost, it's not, and it's nobody's fault, it's just not that popular anymore. You know what I mean? It hasn't been popular for a really, really long time.
With a total of 22, Stevie Wonder has won more Grammy Awards than any other solo artist.
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I'm very thankful for the awards, the Grammy Awards that I've received. And I must honestly tell you that at this point in time, I haven't had enough Grammys.
After more than 40 years in the business, the musical genius who had his first hit at the age of 13 has put the world on notice that he isn't finished yet, despite taking a 10-year break from recording in the wake of his 1996 album Songs in the Key of Life. Refusing to be rushed, it wasn't until 2005 that he announced the release of A Time to Love.
You know, there have been some of that time working with songs. Some of it has been going through the various experiences that created those songs. Some have been moments of great joy, and some have been moments of great sorrow. So is the place that a songwriter or any person that is an artist must confront and be faced with as they go through life. And so from all those experiences, you have a chance to create, express, and hopefully in your experiences that you have in your life, they too will touch the hearts of those that have maybe similar experiences or those similar enough that they can identify in some sort of way.
Much of the album dealt with the deaths of his brother and ex-wife Cyrita, and he was unconcerned with criticism about the lack of pace on some of the album's tracks.
Most importantly is when I do give the music that I'm satisfied with it, that it speaks for what I want to do. Music is music, and you do whatever feels right and good to you to do. I cannot go in the studio and say, okay, I want to do another Superstition, you know, nor can I go in the studio and say, I want to do another A Time to Love. You know, it has to happen the way that it happens.
In 2008, he announced he would be touring Europe, ahead of not one, but 2 new album releases. The first, gospel inspired by Lula, would be a tribute to his mother, one he described Through the Eyes of Wonder as his take on what other people see.
This really is having fun and sharing music and life, and again, saying thank you. That's what it's all about. And as we get into more of the songs for some of the stuff for gospel inspired by Lula, I might do something from there, and I might do some stuff, a couple of things from Through the Eyes of Wonder. So I'll be sharing with you the experience as it is happening.
His 40 top 10 hits have included such timeless classics as Superstition, Isn't She Lovely, Master Blaster and Sir Duke. But he never has to hesitate when asked which is his favourite.
I always answer this question when people ask me what is my most favorite song, with a quote that Duke Ellington used to always say when they asked him what was his most favorite composition. And I have to say, I haven't written it yet.
In the lead up to the Grammys in 2003, the award for Best New Artist looked to be a one-horse race.
Best New Artist, pretty much everyone we talk to thinks it's a lock for Norah Jones. She's kind of the perfect Grammy Best New Artist. She's traditional sounding, she's young, she's beautiful, she plays the piano. She's not going to scare the older voters, it's very important. So she's almost certainly going to win.
Not only did she net the Best New Artist award, she also carried off Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. An incredible achievement for the 24-year-old ex-lounge singer who dropped out of studying jazz piano at university. The daughter of famous sitar player Ravi Shankar, she grew up in Texas and went to the Performing and Visual Arts School in Dallas. Things started to come together for her career-wise when she started a band with fellow jazz folk musician Jesse Harris. She proved she was no flash in the pan with her 2004 release Feels Like Home, which won her another 3 Grammy Awards. After releasing her third album, Not Too Late, she was ready for a new challenge when acclaimed art house director Wong Kar-wai offered her a part in his new film, Burberry Nights.
I was not planning on making any kind of acting debut, and he knocked on my door, and out of the blue, I just thought, okay, well, I'm on tour, and I'm not an actress, so whatever. And then I got off tour, and I finally watched one of his films for the first time. I watched In the Mood for Love, and I thought, wow, that's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I thought, well, let's have lunch. Maybe he wants some music. And he says, you want to be in a movie? I say, okay.
Cast alongside seasoned actors like Jude Law, David Strathairn and Natalie Portman, she had a lot to live up to.
I remember when we were shooting a scene when she has to cry in New York with in the arms of Jude. And so I said, Nora, because she always asked me, do I have to act? I said, don't act, be yourself. And then I said, now you have to act because you are going to cry. And she said, okay, and give me a few minutes. And then we rolled the camera and she cried. And then after that I said, wow, it's great. And she said, do you want one more? I said, no, this girl is going to be an actress, you know.
Burberry Nights ended up being selected as the opening night film for the 2007 Cannes Film Festival. Success was rather a long time coming for British singer-songwriter David Gray, who released his first album, The Century Ends, back in 1993. 6 years later, his fourth album, White Ladder, would set a record for the longest uninterrupted climb to the top of the album charts, on the back of his smash hit single, Babylon. The success of White Ladder helped send his next album, A New Day at Midnight, to #1, and kicked off 2.5 years of touring, by the end of which David wouldn't have cared if he never sang Babylon again.
Of course, I mean, it was killed for me. I'm waiting for it to, I'm trying to resuscitate it from time to time, but how many times did I have to play that thing? Like 10 times a day, 300 days a year, in all kinds of garish situations.
Having spent so much time on the road, he knew all about the pitfalls of playing to new audiences night after night.
I think the two biggest problems of playing music are, repetition and self-consciousness. You become, it poses big problems having to play the same songs all the time. It is a bit of a strain. It's always great when you've been, like we've had a few weeks off and now we'll come back. The first few gigs will be really, really sparky because the songs will feel really new, but then that wears off very fast. So as I say, you've got to keep changing things around, so there's no magic formula, just constant change. That's my approach.
After taking time off to recover, he got back behind the piano to start writing songs for his next album, Life in Slow Motion. The album went to #1 and was hailed as a return to form by critics who hadn't been too impressed with A New Day at Midnight. Since then, he's released 2 compilations, one of his lesser-known early work and a greatest hits album. He's also been putting in appearances at huge gigs like Glastonbury, Live Earth and the Wireless Festival. In 2008, he joined other high-profile artists like Katie Tunstall and Robbie Williams to discuss the state of the music industry.
Obviously, it's a changing time. The music business is sort of falling apart, so I'm interested in any ideas of how to put it back together again. You've got things like Spotify, where people just get free music, so it doesn't look good from a sort of artist perspective. So I think if we all get together, I'm sure someone's got some bright ideas how we can sort of unite and sort of keep hold of our rights.
The story goes that Bob Dylan once hugged Barry Manilow at a party and said, "Don't stop what you're doing, we're all inspired by you." 16 years later, Oprah Winfrey announced that he was one of the most requested guests on her afternoon talk show. Somewhere in between, the most popular adult contemporary artist of the 70s and 80s may have spent some time in the wilderness. But by 2005, he was back in a big way, with his new album, The Greatest Songs of the 50s.
The reason I connected with it was because when I looked at the list of songs that came out of the 50s, it seemed to me that they had been neglected. We've all heard the songs out of the 30s and the 40s, Blue Moon and I've Got a Crush on You and all of those. But nobody seems to have done Unchained Melody or It's Not For Me to Say or Beyond the Sea or any of these songs that were wonderfully written and came out of the 50s, and so that turned me on, and I dove in.
Produced by Clive Davis, it debuted at the top of the Billboard 200 charts, delivering Barry his first #1 in 29 years. Next stop, the 60s.
The 60s, I was really there. I really understood the 60s, and so I put down this long 250-song list, and I sent it out, emailed it to everybody I knew. And I said, pick your 10 favorites. And what kept coming back were the same 10 or 20 songs over and over. Can't Take My Eyes Off of You, What the World Needs Now Is Love, Blue Velvet. And I sent it to Clive, and I said, this is my little personal popularity poll. What do you think? And he said, these are the songs. These are the ones that everybody is going to love. They are #1 songs, and these are the ones that people just love. And it's true.
He and Clive got to work and ended up with a #2 album, sealing the comeback of the singer, songwriter, arranger and producer who started out writing jingles before becoming Bette Midler's accompanist in the early 70s. He found solo stardom with songs like Mandy, Can't Smile Without You, I Write the Songs and Copacabana. His flashy costumes and flamboyant singing style also led to a series of TV specials.
Oh, the hair! Oh my God, the hair! It's just the most horrible. The first time you see me, as I come barreling out from the wings, my girlfriend at the time, Linda, had convinced me to curl my hair. That 2 days before, and I had long schleppy hair, and bang, I looked like I had put my hand in a socket. And that's the first time you see me on my special. Don't ask me how I ever worked again, after that. And then the second special, I wore that Copacabana jacket. I mean, really, somebody shoot me now.
More than 3 decades later, he's practically a permanent fixture at the Las Vegas Hilton. As well as producing albums for other artists, he's also co-written a musical called Harmony. And as for the future,
more music. It's always more music for me. It's always more music, and the same thing with Clive. We just never stop. They'll, for me, they'll be wheeling me out, and I got one more idea. Just give me 10 more minutes. It's all more music. That's for me.